Welcome back to the Views from the Gravel Out podcast. This is episode number 26. I am delighted to be joined by a very good guest in Greg Tompsett, the host of the Greg Tompsett Football Show. How you doing, Greg?
Good, good. We're doing really well. It's been a fun run here. A bunch of Bills wins in a row. Crazy, exciting game this weekend. The trade deadline coming up tomorrow. All kinds of fun stuff going on.
Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Not so bad. Pretty excited to get this rolling.
Kind of just jump right into it. There's a lot to get into. I think, going over this trade deadline, the Bills could, be adding more players to the mix here. Obviously, I already traded for Amari Cooper, gave up a third round pick to do that. But I want to shift our focus into what the Bills still need, because I think there's still a lot of areas of concern for me. They are a 7-win football team, but there's still plenty of areas they can improve on. So we're going to kind of go over some of our, areas of concern, ranking sort of the biggest needs for the Bills. I'll start with you, Greg. Like, what are your biggest needs, and what would you like to see the Bills add, positionally going into the deadline?
I think you have to be able to look at the reality of the injuries that have come up here. That has to factor in. I don't think it's as simple as maybe prior to the last week or two, maybe some people would have had safety as one of their top three. And I think you can make a reasonable argument of why you'd like to see an upgrade. And I even did a list. On Twitter, I'll do like my threads of different ways you can acquire guys, team players you would need them to go out and eat salary for, or guys that are like young and cheap, but maybe aren't that impactful or good, and then guys who I call my Goldilocks picks, where like we can afford them, they're going to be impactful and to start, and I think they're coming from a team who's selling. And I had safety as one of the four that I did, but if I'm ranking the top three, you know the uncertainty around Keon Coleman, now the uncertainty that we have Dwayne Carter on IR, and we've seen some of the struggles at defensive tackle. And now we saw Casey Tuhill go out. We saw now Dwayne Smoot having wrist surgery and having to go out, and he's on IR. I think I'd have to go. I could probably debate whether D tackle or D end is my one or two, but I have them as my one and two. I think I would do defensive end because I think Dwayne Smoot was maybe a little more important than we realize.
Mhm.
And I'll go D tackle two, and then I think I'd do wide receiver ahead of safety if I did a third.
Yeah,
But D line is where I really want him to focus.
yeah, and I'm glad you had pointed out those injuries because there's a few factors for me. I look at obviously the injuries that have built up around this team. I feel like everybody on this team's got a wrist injury right now. I don't know what's going on.
It's
Um,
literally like five people though. It's
yeah,
crazy.
it's
Like
crazy. I've never seen anything like it. It's
I
absolutely
don't
insane.
like. Do we need to do like more wrist exercise, more grip strength?
Maybe
I don't
something
understand
like
here. I
that.
don't get it.
It's crazy. But yeah, and I also look at age. Some of these players are getting older, and you're not going to be able to rely on them to play, a certain amount of snaps. And I look at a guy like Von Miller, especially on edge, like, he's going to be capped in terms of what he does, with his snap count. And, even, a guy like Daquan Jones, who, I think has left a little bit to be desired. You're starting to see sort of a steady decline from him, and you're not getting the same level of play from last year. I'll go to you, Mike. Like, what are you looking at as far as like the needs go? Like, we had mentioned edge. I was going to bring up linebacker. I'll get into that in a minute. I want to see where kind of you stand as far as all these, areas of concerns go.
I would say the ranking for my list of needs for this team, number one would be depth at receiver. I feel like we had nothing but depth guys, and now we could use some depth due to
Mhm.
injury and just it's always good to have receiver depth. And I fully agree with the defensive line. I feel like just adding a guy even that you could consistently throw into the rotation that you could learn to trust down the stretch would be very beneficial. And for me, no, my third's going to be safety. Yes, it's looked better, but I still I don't trust that group down the stretch to really get the job done against, a team that's playing quite literally right now, like the Chiefs,
Mhm.
even though with all their injuries.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'll get into that. I mean, I think the safety thing is a little hard for me because I do think it's a very hard position to play in a Sean McDermott defense in terms
Mhm.
of, what's required of the safety position. You need to be able to communicate, you need to know the system, there's a lot that goes into it. So I think it's a little bit trickier to add somebody midseason not named Micah Hyde or, if you give him a call. or maybe even Jordan Poyer. I don't know if he would be available, but
Hmm.
it to me, there's just it's a probably the most difficult position to play on this defense, and with a lot of the too high shell, like they're tasked with doing a lot. But I had talked about linebacker briefly before because while Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano are fantastic, you can make a very strong argument that's the best linebacker duo in the NFL. You can't rely on them to be healthy for the entirety of the season. Bernard's missed a couple games. Milano's gonna have to, still fully recover from that bicep injury. We don't know how effective he'll be after that injury. And then you look at the depth behind him. I like Dorian Williams, but is he somebody you can fully trust? We saw in this Miami game, he was kind of running around wild, like, a chicken with his head cut off. I mean, he just kind of looked a little bit lost out there. And when it comes to January and February, I'm not sure I want that scenario. We saw it play out last year with AJ Klein and some of the linebackers they were putting on the field. So I look at linebacker more so of the run defense. I do think the Bills need better, much more improved area. They need to get a better run defending linebacker. And if they're able to kind of get somebody on early downs that can take a little bit of the load off of Dorian Williams or even Terrell Bernard, it I think could be monumental for this defense. And I know it's a team that likes to primarily use two linebackers. I do think adding a linebacker could be very beneficial, especially to talk about the teams they're playing. You got Detroit, you got the Rams, you got the Chiefs. These are all teams that are very good at running the ball, and the Bills have struggled against that. And I'm not
Big
sure
time.
you can really trust these guys to do that. So we kind of talked about all the areas of concern. Now let's get into the good stuff and talk about our favorite trade targets. Greg, I want to start with you. We're gonna go, I think probably two for each. If we have the same ones, we'll kind of just go over it again. But Greg, who are you looking at for the Bills to add? Obviously, it's got to be realistic, but who are you kind of eyeing for the Bills?
So I'll do one at each of my top two positions. My process I go through, I literally take the NFL standings and flip them upside down and I
Mm,
start at the bottom. I go onto overthecap.com and look at who's already had their like payments for the year converted into bonuses, so their
yeah,
salary's low, and then who also isn't a future building block of the team. Everybody wants to trade for, like, oh, how would we
yeah,
get Dexter Lawrence? Like, why the hell would the Giants trade Dexter Lawrence? He's the best
right,
player on their team.
Yeah.
Like, why in the world would they trade him? It's usually a guy with an expiring contract who's going to be a free agent next year, a guy whose age doesn't fit with the development of their team. So I've got a handful that I went through, but the one that actually surprised me of how many boxes he checked was in New Orleans was Chase Young.
mm,
um, Chase Young is one of the rare guys on my list. Normally, my guys are end up like 29 or 30 because there's a reason they're on the list. He's 25. He hasn't turned 26 yet. He's already been paid his money by New Orleans. Their team obviously is starting from scratch. They fired their coach today.
yeah,
Um, they're going to be looking to collect assets. He's on a 1 year deal. He's not going to be there long term. They literally can't afford him to keep him. They couldn't even if they wanted to.
yeah.
Um, he's got 30 pressures,
Wow,
which isn't at Gregory Rousseau level, but is pretty darn good. And you're
pretty
talking
good.
like top 12, top 15 in the league. He's a guy that I really think would make an impactful difference at defensive end. He's making $1.2 million, which is perfect because we don't have any
Yeah,
money.
right.
So we can actually afford him. So he's was a shocking one. I didn't expect a guy like that to make my list, but he checks virtually every box and is a guy that, if it is a fit, isn't crazy that we would want to extend him in the
Yeah,
offseason. So that's an interesting one. Another guy is one that again checks a lot of boxes because he I know that the team is interested in him because we literally had him here for a visit this offseason, and that's defensive tackle Sebastian Joseph Day.
yeah,
He ended up getting offered more money by Tennessee, which God bless him, good for him. We probably offered him about the same money as, we had a lot of those guys in that like $2.7 million range. I'm sure we offered him that. I think he got like 4.5 or 5 million from Tennessee. So good for him. They're not going anywhere. And that's a guy who, again, has really good advanced metrics, is consistently creating pressure, and is just a really powerful dude. He's like 6'4", 310 with like 0% body fat. He's a
Yeah.
freak when you see him. He's built like insanely.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that I think could come in and is honestly very similar to Dwayne Smoot, where a lot of people are, well, is he a defensive end or a defensive tackle? And he can play all over the place. He can play strong side end on rundowns. He can pass rush from the three tech on passing downs. So those are guys who I think are realistic in that the team they're on is selling. They fit a need. We can afford them because they're not making any money. And is something like our both guys that whether it's the Bills or not, I think there's a decent chance that they get moved somewhere
Yeah, for
here in the
sure.
next 24 hours.
I agree completely. Mike, what do you got for us?
So my top two names that I feel like are financially realistic and are actually on the trade market as well is KJ Osborne from the New England Patriots and Andre Cisco. I just feel like adding one of those two guys could just help catapult the depth that this team could use going down the stretch because after acquiring Amari Cooper, I now believe that this offense has what it takes to take it to another level. And I feel like adding a guy like KJ Osborne, really good deep threat, is a guy that, you could rely on him almost the same way that it seems that they are relying on Mac Hollins, which is if you need a big play, he seems like a guy that can go out there and get one for you. And Cisco, I mean, he's played really well this season. He's making virtually nothing. I'm pretty sure I looked earlier. His average annual salary is like $1.3 million. I mean, that's absolutely nothing. And if it works out, maybe that's like a long-term guy that you can keep around.
Yeah, definitely. I had mentioned Cisco earlier. I made a post on him a while back because that's a young player on a rookie deal that, can maybe fit with your long-term plan. So you can kind of build out that safety room with Cisco and potentially Cole Bishop as your future at safety and feel good, real good about that if you make that move. For my two, I went
He
with some older. Go ahead, Greg.
I was just gonna help on the one. So Cisco is actually one of the rare guys. If you saw like the last year of like Spencer Brown's rookie deal, we're about to see with Christian Benford, he actually has the like playing time incentive
Oh,
where
okay.
he was on his rookie deal, which would have been like normally 1 million. His salary actually got bumped up to 3.1 million for this year because of how many snaps he played last year. So it's a
Okay.
good thing. But we would probably need the Jags to eat a little bit of that.
Yeah.
It's he was on my list, was there, but he's actually one where I had to put him in my category of if the team will eat some money, we could take him.
Yeah.
So that's an easier one because it's not a lot of money. We would just need them to eat like 1.5 million or so.
Yeah.
But that was one where I was surprised because I he's in the last year of his rookie deal, which should be pretty cheap. But it was, when you play that many snaps, you end up getting that I think it's like PPT. It's called the player's performance incentive or whatever it's called. Um, but that one he actually bumped his salary up a little bit for this year.
No
Yeah.
kidding.
So the two guys I went with, you're probably going to need both teams to eat a little bit of salary. But both of these players, I think, are tremendous for this defense. And I'm going to go with Robert Spillane, somebody who the Air Raid show has mentioned a few times as somebody that could really fill a need for the Bills as that third linebacker. Look, he's first in the NFL in tackles right now. He's got 7 TFLs. He's fourth in stops. Like, got a very good run defense grade, whether you value PFF or not. To me, he's been productive. Last year, he had the most productive year of his career. He is a very nuanced run defender. So, like I mentioned earlier, what I want at that linebacker position is, more gap discipline. I want a just better improvement in the run game, and I think he gives you that for sure. And he's a quick trigger. He's going to get in the backfield. He's not great in coverage. He's not going to be able to man up against everybody and win every time. He's going to get beat, but he can bait quarterbacks and underneath throws. And he had 3 interceptions last year. He's proven that, and I think he's also a captain on the Raiders. He's played a lot of snaps. I actually think he has the most snaps played out of any linebacker in the NFL right now. But he's been very, very solid for the Raiders. And like I said, it never hurts with depth. And I think that's been sort of the point that we've been pounding home so far is the Bills need to shore up their depth because we don't want to be in a situation like we were last year. We want to be comfortable going into a playoff game against Patrick Mahomes, and we weren't in that scenario last year. So I like him. Another player I really, really like is Zadarius Smith. I'm not entirely
God, that's
sure how
crazy. It was
much.
literally running through my brain right now.
I'm not
That's
entirely sure, Greg, how much Cleveland would
You
have to eat.
you you did perfect on both. Both the Raiders and the Browns have already paid those guys their
Okay.
money in other mechanisms. So Robert in this year, but his salary is only 1.8 million.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I guess technically that's like borderline for us, but I think we could take him as is with how much is left because it's about $900,000 left for the rest
Yeah.
of the year. Zadarius Smith is another one where his total number for this year was actually closer to like 12 million, 11.5 million in compensation, but they already
Hmm.
paid him the money.
Yeah.
He actually has a $1.2 million salary. So
That's
both of
very
them
nice.
are gimmies from a financial standpoint. You don't need the team to eat any more money because they already ate it, which is the benefit.
Zadarius
And
Smith would be
yeah,
fantastic.
I even think Cleveland has shown that they're willing to eat salary anyways to facilitate trades. I'm not entirely sure.
All
Don't quote me on
all
it.
the
If they did
names
it with
we've
Mari
thrown out,
Cooper.
I'd say the exact same as Zadarius. They had already done it.
Okay.
They're in such a financial mess. They had done all the like going into the season.
Yeah.
They had eaten all those and like made it so they were creating cap space to carry over to next year.
They knew.
So as like
Hmm.
Amari Cooper as an example, they're going to have a $23 million dead
Oof.
cap hit for Amari Cooper next year because of the way
Rough.
they did this.
That's real
Um,
bad.
out of all the names we've thrown out there, I think Zadarius Smith is the most likely to be moved. So it'd be cool if it's the Bills, but he's the one I'm the most confident is not going to be wearing a Browns
Yeah.
uniform come Wednesday.
I could see
Yeah.
him being a Lion.
Yeah.
It
Definitely.
makes a
Yeah.
Yeah.
ton of sense for,
Yeah.
for them
Did I?
Way
losing
more for them than us.
Hutchinson, being so
Mhm.
competitive, and they you know they look so good right now that it would be really silly for them not to reinvest a little bit into that pass rush. That
Yeah.
right now, for my money, that looks like the best team in the NFL.
Hmm.
Um,
I agree.
so with how good they look, that would be kind of crazy for them not to invest something there. So it doesn't have to be Smith. The other guys I listed,
Hmm.
like Chase Young, even honestly, Cam Jordan, also
Yeah.
down in New Orleans.
Yeah.
There's a couple others. I'll pull up my list here. I posted earlier tonight because it's got a handful of guys, and every one of them, it would be that I would expect the Lions to be like trying to get just ahead of us, to
The
be the
Yeah.
Max
team that we're
Crosby
trying
talk is
to go
sick,
after.
but that's not a
Um,
guy that's going to get moved in the middle of the year.
No,
I,
it's not
I mean, not
realistic.
without you'd have to be talking about multiple first round
Yeah.
picks and a player
Mhm.
like a really really huge bounty. And like, don't get me wrong, he is an absolute monster, but he's also making a ton of money, and
Mhm.
Hutchinson's going to start making a ton of money. That's also kind of an odd spot to get yourself into with the contracts they've given out for Penny Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff, and even David Montgomery is kind of paid a lot
Yeah.
for as far as a running back goes. I think money wise, Zadarius Smith, Chase Young, those are two that I had out there. Cam Jordan, Jadeveon Clowney is another guy
Yeah.
down in Carolina, and a sneaky one that matches closer to what you guys had brought up, where maybe there's a fit of financial and availability and a young guy you might want to re-sign later on is Azeez Ojulari out
I
of
Yeah.
the
was literally, oh
Giants.
my God. I was literally going to say
It's
Um,
reading
that
our
too.
mind today.
so
Yeah.
It's
yeah, so that's
crazy.
that's another one where, last year of his rookie deal, 1.5 million in salary, totally doable. You'd basically be asking Shane, Bean would call Joe Shane and be like, hey, are you guys going to try to re-sign
Yeah.
him? Or if not, let us give you the draft pick now rather than waiting to try to get a comp pick later. And if he's being honest, big, do you think you're going to be here in 2 years to use that draft pick if you
Yeah.
wait for the comp pick? I can give you one right
Right.
now that you could use right now. So he's probably a sneaky one from a investment standpoint where he'd be more along the lines of, hey, let's trade for him, do an in-house evaluation, kind of try before you buy, and
Right.
then try to extend.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I always like those kind of moves, and I've always thought as myself, if I was ever an NFL GM, I would love to make those moves for the long term and also the short term because you're kind of just nailing both. And I don't know. I'm in love with Zadarius Smith because I he's my number one target because I think he's still proven that he can play at a very high level. He had a very high pressure rate last year. I want to say it was in the top 10. Week 8, he had on 9 pressures. He had a 29% pressure rate. Like at the very least, he's one of the best number two edge rushers in the league, and that's better than what the Bills have. I mean, you can make the argument that Greg Rousseau's in that range, but outside of him, you don't really get that consistency with this group. And I just think this team really could use that. And you can never go wrong with having too many pass rushers in this league with the quarterback talent and the guys that are out there. But I'm glad, Greg, that you had mentioned Joe Shane and like even a guy I don't think you mentioned was Dan Morgan up in
Mm.
Carolina as a very
Yeah, the
relevant connection.
relationships matter for sure.
They do, and I think when I go into who I think the Bills ultimately trade for, I look at those two teams because I do think the conversations that Brandon Beane and that front office is having with these other front offices, it's going to hold a lot more weight in Carolina and New York because he knows these guys and he kind of knows what makes him tick. And so as far as like predicting what I think happens, I do think it's going to be a trade with one of those two teams. I think the Bills are going to make a move. I don't know what specific player it's going to be, but somebody I had written down with Carolina was Ashawn Robinson. He's a very solid run defender. That's pretty much all he's going to do. And I know they have Austin Johnson, but losing, like you said, losing Dwayne Carter is really going to hurt you. And it showed up in against the Dolphins, and you have a very tough slate. And yes, you want guys for January and hopefully February for the Super Bowl. This next slate of games after the Colts, like you're going up against the top dogs in the NFL. You got San Francisco, you got Kansas City, you got the Rams, the Lions. It's going to be a tough test, and I think you need a guy for those games. Dwayne Carter probably not going to be in those games, so I look at defensive tackle and I value that a little bit because if you can bring in a guy like Ashawn Robinson to stop the run, not get killed on these traps and whams anymore, it could be very beneficial for the Bills, and that's something I had referenced that connection for sure.
One more name
Yeah,
I'd like to throw out there, kind of like a bargain kind of guy, probably could get him for close to honestly nothing, is Arden Key.
I do like
He's
Arden Key.
yeah,
Yep.
Tennessee right now, 4 sacks. I'm pretty sure I just looked his salaries like it's literally $1 million. I mean, might be a pretty good fit for this team as well.
Yeah.
yeah.
I believe he got a
When I
sack
was
on Josh Allen.
researching, yeah, when I was researching Sebastian Joseph Day, his name certainly came up as well because I even looked at who's their high paid guy, Harold Landry. I was actually
Hmm.
looking at Harold Landry because I was curious what his contract was, and he's getting paid $1 billion. I think
Hmm.
Yeah.
I want to say it's
I
like
think it's like
23
17 million,
million. Yeah, it's a
23.
crazy number. It's a crazy
Yeah.
number. So I was like, oh well, that's not in the play. I'm not going to ask anybody to eat $17 million for a guy that I don't know that I want to pay them that amount to have them eat it. But while
Yeah.
I was looking at it, I was like, huh. Arden Key's better than I thought he was.
Yeah.
Like I didn't end up listing him on my list, but I was like, huh, he's doing a little bit better than I
Pretty
thought.
Come a
solid.
long
So
way from
that's a good
LSU.
call. That's a
He
good call.
has. He definitely has. And like I just feel like there's so many in years past. I want to actually ask you this, Greg, because the NFL trade deadline is usually boring. You get like one or two trades, right?
Mhm.
And now you see in recent years the steam starting to pick up a little bit more. As far as activity goes for tomorrow, like what do you expect it to be if you had to guess? Like, do you think it's going to be super busy? Do you think it's going to be just boring? Like, what would you say?
So I think it gets graded on an unfair scale because we've already seen Amari Cooper, Devontae
Hmm.
Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, so many different moves, Deontay Johnson. There's already been a ton of trades. So
Yeah.
so many of those spots are teams that, would it look cooler if they all waited and did it in the 2 hours before the deadline passed? Sure, that would look cool, but they've already done the trades. So
Yeah.
this has been a very good trade deadline because the trade deadline is the couple weeks leading up to the trade
Hmm.
deadline. Um, I'm sure we'll see a handful more, specifically because some of the injuries that are out there, and there is such a defined bottom tier of the league. You have 10 teams tied with two
Yeah.
wins,
Yeah.
and then a huge gap, and it really starts to separate, and you almost jump from two wins immediately up to four, and teams that are in contention. So you have, you know, 18 to 20 buyers and like 10 to 12 sellers. And I think there's, so many teams down in that area that you'll have a couple more moves. So,
Hmm.
you never know. Some of the Bills could do player for player moves. I even put it out there like, hey, now that Quandre Diggs got injured for the Titans, Mike Edwards wants to play, what if you did Mike Edwards in a sixth for Arden Key in a seventh or Sebastian
Yeah.
Joseph Day in a seventh? What if a team, we're actually doing pretty good from an offensive line health standpoint? Will Clapp is like our ninth or 10th offensive lineman. What
We
if a
can't trade
team
him.
needed him, but what if they would, what if that's something where it's, Will Clapp in a sixth for Robert Spillane in a seventh? It's stuff
Right.
like that where maybe those are some of the moves that could help um, make one of these things happen to where you needed to be able to get a guy. So we'll see where it comes in. But I expect if I had to bet, like if you gave me the over under on Brandon Beane making a trade at 0.5, I think I would take the over. I don't know that it's going to be as exciting as some people want. Matter of fact, I know it's not going to be as exciting as
Yeah.
some people want. I think all of us, I think we've thrown out like 10 names today that all of them are within the range
Yeah.
of
3 of them are getting
possibility that I
moved
could
max.
see. So yeah, when we don't trade for Dexter Lawrence and Micah Parsons, I think that some people will be really upset, but
Hmm.
it's uh it's at least going to be. I think that we'll see something because you got to
Yeah.
remember one of the years he made two trades right before the deadline, but it was Naheem Hines and Dean Marlowe.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just little tweaks around the edges, and it's the kind of situation where you're just adding, like you said, depth. And I actually didn't comment because I didn't want to interrupt you, but I thought KJ Osborne was a great call. I think that's the kind of guy. Another guy who's in that same realm, even kind of looks like him, is Darius Slayton with the Giants. He's the
That'd be
kind of guy
Yeah.
that I
ideal.
could see sliding in. That he could come in. You know, wouldn't matter if he was the third, fourth, fifth guy, but it's just one more guy in there to contribute. And that if somebody needs a breather, like he can come in and make good plays. And the one thing we don't really have is like a speedier deep threat. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind a guy that like teams have to be a little nervous about. And Darius Slayton's not the most consistent guy, but he can still take the top off.
Yeah.
He's
He
nice.
can.
He's nice.
Yeah. And that's kind of
Played
what
well.
I've been talking about for a while. Is having somebody that to be that true vertical threat. And Amari Cooper can do it to an extent. He's not this obviously the same player he was 3, 4 years ago, but he can, safeties are going to respect him. I do like the Darius Slayton idea. There's a couple other names out there I'm sure that we're not talking about. Um, but we talked about a lot of these trades, and I think a lot of people bring up names like Mike Edwards and guys the Bills might move. And a guy whose name gets brought up quite often is Kaiir Elam, and he played obviously on Sunday and had a meaningful role in this game. Do you think that ship has sailed, Greg? Do you think he's gonna just stick around, or maybe he's an off-season move, or like where do you see his future being? Like, because it's a very interesting situation because he still hasn't played a ton of snaps this year. So it's tricky. Do the Bills really value him? Do they view him as a sort of that Dane Jackson kind of piece? Like, where would you kind of sit as far as what his future is gonna be?
I think his future is as the 2025 starting corner for the Bills. I think Rasul Douglas is going to be 31. That's a really treacherous age curve for corners.
Yeah.
Now, Rasul plays a style that I could see aging where they go year to year, but I'm not sure he wants a 1 year deal. Maybe he doesn't.
Hmm.
So I think, I would say it's Kaiir Elam battling a second round pick at corner for our starting spot opposite Christian Benford next year, and you still have him on a rookie deal. And the fact that he came in and started yesterday shows you that they haven't lost faith in his ability. They didn't start Jamarcus Ingram over him. They didn't
Hmm.
start Cam Lewis over him. He started. He was the guy who came in. And anytime Benford or Rasul have to come off the field, he's the guy who comes in and plays. So would it be better if the guy we took in the first round is running away and he's the guy playing at an all-pro level like Christian Benford is? Sure, but we drafted a guy in that draft who's playing at an all-pro level. I don't care which order they got picked in all reality.
Hmm.
So if it turns out next year it's our two starting corners, well then that's fine.
Yeah.
So I now don't get me wrong, like there is a price. If there's a deal where hey, Arizona's going to eat money for Buda Baker, but we have to give him back Kaiir Elam. Hey, Kaiir, I wish you all the best, man.
Yeah.
I'll help you pack if you want. But short of it being something where we can't say no, I just don't see it. Again, I've been shocked by plenty of things in the past, but I just do not see him being the
Mhm.
piece that gets moved.
Yeah.
I wish he played
Um,
more, frankly.
Yeah,
I do too. I do think he's better suited for that man coverage style, and we've kind
Definitely.
of seen it. And he's made plays for the Bills. Like it's not like he's
yeah,
been a complete washout and he hasn't done anything. I mean, he had an interception last year against Mason Rudolph. Had an interception. They're not great quarterbacks, but he's making plays in the playoffs,
yeah.
and that counts for something. It
It's kind of
does.
like it's kind of like that linebacker discussion. Like sometimes would I like to see us sprinkle in more base defense to
Hmm.
be able to have the that optionality to play three linebackers? Sure. Do I actually want them to take Taron Johnson off the field? No, not
Not
really. I
really. No,
don't.
no.
So it's the same thing. Like I'd love if he forced it that he had to play more. But Russell
Yeah,
Douglas and Christian Benford are playing great. Like
yeah,
not pretty good or except like great. Honestly, maybe our two best defenders on the team this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
Um,
Probably.
so it's a great problem to have that we have a guy that we'd really like to play more who can't quite get himself on the field. I wish that one of those three had inside outside versatility. I hate it that anytime Taron Johnson goes down, it has to be Cam Lewis or Jamarcus Ingram. And like, hey, we've
Yeah.
got three quarter, like one of them can't move inside. Like, is
Hmm.
that not? Can't we teach one of them to be able to? I don't even care which one. I don't even
Yeah,
care which one. Like, can't one of them move in there?
yeah,
But yeah, I think it's great that we. I agree. I'd love to see him be able to get on the field more, but kind of is what it is.
yeah. Definitely. I'll get into some questions now submitted by my followers, and I'm already seeing Micah Parsons' name being thrown in there. Miles Garrett's
That's
getting
so
thrown.
insane.
We
If that
already
actually
talked.
happened, I don't even know what I would do with myself.
I
I don't.
probably wouldn't
If I woke
honestly.
up and I saw Micah Parsons to the Buffalo Bills for 4 first-round picks, I'd run around the streets naked. I'd be
I'd
so
probably do the
happy.
same thing. I
And
would.
I don't know if you're joking or not, but that's literally the kind of thing it would cost. Like
But it's
Yeah,
worth it.
maybe three instead of
Honestly,
four.
in a crazy way, it's worth it because
And it's
when he's healthy, he is otherworldly amazing.
but even
yeah,
flip it around the other way. What so whether it's Dallas or whether it's the Giants with Dexter Lawrence or like any of the other like crazy impact Miles Garrett with the Browns, why would a team like that when you're selling a like defensive player of the year caliber player, even if it's three or four picks, like you're talking about trading a defensive player of the year candidate to a team with Josh Allen, you're guaranteeing that it's four picks that are
yeah,
25th to 32nd. Like, why would you say if you even did the math on like the draft value charts of what four of those stack up to, it's still like barely a high first round pick. Um,
yeah,
so it's all that like yeah, it actually probably does make sense for them, and it's also why those teams aren't probably considering it because they know that it's for low first, and they don't you don't trade that like that's
For a team like
you know
Cleveland, though, like you're stuck with that Deshaun money for 3, 4 years
yeah.
anyway.
there's
That's
a
a
piece of
difference
me
No
that
issue.
wondered
draft.
is he their get out of jail free card to do it that
Yeah,
I still think it'd be crazy and dumb,
It
but
would.
I guess it's not quite as crazy as like
Micah.
Dexter Lawrence or Micah Parsons or something like that.
correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but like you had said with Zadarius Smith and Amari Cooper, Garrett already got paid, so his contract is technically tradable for
um
this season, or it's you can
they did
at
the
least
same
hold on to it for
thing.
this year.
In theory, you could move him.
Yes.
And basically, so the team that acquires him is actually getting a great deal. If again, they're not going to, but let's
Right.
go into the crazy world where they are moving. Um, it's minimum salaries the next 2 years after this year, with like the 1 year is like a 17 or $18 million prorated option bonus, and then the next year is another like 15 or 16, which means like with the money they've already paid him, like Miles Garrett is a 19 and $18 million player. So you're actually more realistic. It's that he's going to say, no, 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 no. I want the TJ Watt money. I
Yeah.
want the Bosa. Like I want $35 million a
I
year,
want to
like those
reset the
guys are getting.
market. Yeah. Yeah.
Which, for my money, he's worth.
Yeah.
He is an absolute game wrecker. So trading for him, you'd give him whatever money you wanted. But yeah, I'd be flabbergasted if they moved
Yeah,
him.
God,
They
that'd be
would be
amazing.
it would be the latest embarrassing move for the most embarrassing franchise in pro
correct.
sports.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, if I woke up and I saw that, I would remember that moment until the day I died.
I
That's
mean,
how
I remembered
amazing it
this
would be.
where I was for the Dig trade. I remember where I was for
Mm,
the Cooper trade.
Me
These
too.
things
Me
stick with
too.
you, and if
yeah.
they do some miraculous thing happens in the next, I don't know, 12 hours or so, I would be over the moon. But
Mm,
we gotta
dream.
stay realistic here and
Dream.
know what's possible within the cap and within the structure of what Brandon Bean does because he doesn't really. I mean, the only all-in move that he's made with those big contracts has been Von Miller, paying somebody that level of money that's not on the team already. So it's rare you get that from this franchise, this organization. So even that, you add that element to it, it makes it even less likely.
We have
Um,
McDonald's at home.
we
We're
do.
getting Arden Key.
We do. And you know what? I'd be very happy with Arden Key.
Me
You
too.
might
Me
provoke
too,
the
Ron.
same
It's just
reaction
we're talking about two different
as Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
It's just
spectrum.
I love
Correct.
trades. I love
Um,
this time of the year.
Give me two of them from the same team. Like, honest to
Yeah.
God, give me Arden
Yeah.
Key and Sebastian Joseph Day, and I'd feel
It'd be a
really
dub.
good. Like,
That's an A
I'd
plus
feel
trade
really,
deadline.
really good. Like,
Yeah.
it'd
Hmm.
be
Yeah.
fantastic. Like, you would immediately plug two spots.
Let's go.
They would come in and contribute immediately. I'd be ecstatic.
Yeah. Me as well. I want to get into some of these questions now.
Ready?
Some of them I found a little bit interesting, and we'll kind of go through them here one by one. But Randy says here, why don't the Bills go all in more like the Rams did when they acquired Von Miller and Odell Beckham? I want to just take the lead here, and then I'll let you go. You guys go whenever you're ready. And I just want to start by saying, like, the Rams, what they did, yes, it won them a Super Bowl. That's great. But the fallout of some of those moves that they made costed them, a few years of contention. And now we're talking about Matthew Stafford playing at the age he is, probably limited in terms of what they can do. Um, so I think, Greg will probably agree with this. Every organization has their set of rules and protocol they want to go about when they acquire players, and the Bills are no different. Brandon Beane has made it very clear he doesn't want to be the team that's kicking the can down the road, in which they've had to do it sometimes, but they don't have to do it as the extent of, some other teams like the Saints and the Rams, where you're really not able to crawl out of that financial burden. He's able to really secure this team well, he positions his team well because he's not locking them into, really long-term commitment deals. And with the exception of Von Miller, they really haven't done that. And so I think when you say, why don't the Bills go all in like the Rams, I say, because they don't want to be in the same situation as the Rams were after they won that Super Bowl. They can win a Super Bowl without having to make those moves. They definitely have the talent to do it. So I think making some of those moves, yes, it would help and it would probably boost your chances of winning a Super Bowl. It would also lower your chances of winning a Super Bowl in the years following. Greg, what would you have to add to that as far as like, what, why teams don't, or specifically the Bills don't kind of go all in necessarily like that?
I'll take it a step further. I have no idea what he's talking about.
Right.
We are all in. Why do you think we can only sign guys for the minimum contract? We've spent all of our freaking money.
Yeah.
That's as all in as you can get. We've
Yeah.
spent all the money. We've gone out and got players. Not only do we spend all the money, we spent all the money and we traded for Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How? What the hell? I don't understand. Like, we have gone out and acquired as much talent as you can possibly afford on a team, and we went out and also traded for Amari Cooper on top of that.
Mhm.
Um, I don't. I have no idea what their expectations are, what they think all in looks like compared to what I'm seeing. Because what
Yeah.
I'm seeing is the team that spent the most cash of any franchise in the NFL the last 4 years.
Yeah.
We've spent more money. That's how you measure all in. Are we doing
Right.
everything we possibly can to go out there and do that? We're spending all the money. That means we're kicking cans down the road. Even though Brandon Beane said he doesn't like to, he does it an awful
He
lot for
does.
somebody
He
who
does.
doesn't like to. And I dare you to go look for a contract on the Bills right now that hasn't been restructured, because there isn't one.
Yeah.
We've done it to every single contract. We are all in. It's like that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, it doesn't matter if you believe in ghost stories, you're in one.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if you think they're all in or not. We are.
Yeah, for sure. And
If
I
you would
think,
have, if that question would have been thrown out to me 3 weeks ago, I would have agreed to an extent. But with trading for Amari Cooper, I feel like I now believe in my heart of hearts that Brandon Beane has the self-awareness to know what this team needs in order to be successful this season. If we would have just kept rolling forward with the everybody eats mentality of, Mac Hollins, MVS, all them guys, I can't say I would have bought it. But with
yeah,
trading for Amari Cooper, I feel like you should be more than satisfied. I mean, he went out, he went out and put out a much needed fire that was seeming to
With
raise.
a premium asset. Like, you
Yeah,
paid a
third
significant
round pick.
price
Yep.
for a guy at, I think, pretty clearly the biggest need on the roster.
Yeah,
very,
for sure.
very, very great acquisition.
Yeah, and they also addressed it at the perfect time, I think, too. I mean, after what we saw against Houston with the 9 of 31 passing, and even in the Ravens game, they were struggling to move the ball, and that proves that the Bills are all in, because Brandon Beane didn't accept that. He went out and after those two games, he's like, we got to get a receiver now, and they did that. They went out and addressed it rather quickly. I mean, like you said, it's been a few weeks now, so it's a couple weeks before the deadline. He knew what this team needed. He didn't waste his time. And I think, with him being quick to go out and get a player like that, it shows that he's got the willingness to be aggressive. And I think even when it comes to the draft, Brandon Beane has been for the better part of 5, 6 years now, like one of the more aggressive GMs in the league.
He also
And
didn't let one of the other wide receiver hungry teams go beat them
right,
to a player
exactly.
where we needed a player like Cooper where he had already been paid his bonus or
Hmm.
his money in a bonus and that his salary was low. It would have been a disaster if we let somebody else go beat us to him. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
we would have to like beg a team to like, hey, come on, will you eat some salary so we can afford to trade for that guy?
Hmm.
It would have been or that we were talking about some of the names you threw out earlier, where instead of Cooper and KJ Osborne or Darius Slayton, that we were only getting a Darius Slayton or KJ
Yeah.
Osborne. We're
Yeah,
like,
he
Yeah.
made an
yeah,
A plus move with that. A
Yeah.
plus
that's
move.
still
He
the
it
everybody
the way it
eats.
was timed,
Yeah,
I think it was perfect, because I think if you ask me, gun to my head, who's a better receiver, Amari Cooper, DeAndre Hopkins, I'm going to say Amari Cooper. And I
it
just
is.
think the age, he's younger, he gives much more than DeAndre Hopkins does. And we'll kind of move on here. I mean, we kind of covered our bases with that. The last question I'll get into here is from Bobby, and I'm gonna let Greg take this one because he is the contract guy. He asks, who do you think is the next player that's going to get an extension from the Bills out of Christian Benford, Khalil Shakir, or Greg Rousseau?
Um, so the good news is we have all of them under contract this year and next year.
Hmm.
So we have time, but similar to where we saw the Spencer Brown extension at Oliver, lots of other guys that we've done, as we get to the end of the summer. Um, I think Terrell Bernard is the most likely.
Hmm.
I think I'll put Khalil Shakir next. Um, I think Christian Benford is still better than 50-50. And I hope that we re-sign Gregory Rousseau, but anytime you get involved with edge rushers and how much money they get, you look at a guy like Jonathan Grenard wasn't like a household name that everybody knew about. He got $76 million. Like, it's just they get paid a ton of
Only
money.
Yeah,
takes a little bit of something, little bit of substance, and it'll get you a bag.
yeah, it's a
Um,
very tricky
he's
market.
playing he's playing great. Now luckily we have him this year and next year. He's
Yeah,
maybe the first guy that we could actually see Brandon Beane use the franchise tag.
yeah,
He's the
I
only
agree.
guy that I could actually see it, because by that time that's going to be like 23-25 million dollars. There's a chance that's how much he's going to get paid.
yeah,
I was just
Um,
gonna say, God,
yeah,
it's
like
three
honestly, it
times.
could easily be like 4 years, $100 million. Like, that's
Hmm.
for
yeah,
sure the kind
All it
of
takes is
money he
one
could
year,
get.
one season.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's really all it
Um,
takes.
so between this year and next year, we'll see. He's the one that, like, I think they want to resend all of them. I think there's
Yeah,
actually like a non-zero chance they do resend all of them. He's the one I have the most concern with, just because it's going to be the biggest number.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I think
I
they let
mean,
one walk.
I
I
yeah,
think they
I
keep two
think
of the three.
it's gonna be very hard to keep them all. With obviously, I would like to see them prioritize Shakir just for the fact that a slot receiver as productive and reliable as him.
Josh isn't letting him go anywhere.
Yeah,
No.
exactly. It's very hard to find and replicate that connection. They have tried years and years of getting another number three, number two receiver and making it work with Josh. But Shakir, to me, has been the most consistent, been the most reliable, and has been at least proven to me that he is that guy. And I don't think you can let a guy like that walk. And yeah, even Bernard, he's going to be probably the future of this defense, because Milano's climbing up in age and he has got a lot on his plate already. And so, yeah, there's definitely a ton of guys the Bills can go with, and we even talked about going before the Spencer Brown extension, talking about numbers with him and how I thought it was going to be higher than our other co-hosts thought it would be, and that's just the way it works. It's always going to be higher and higher and higher, and like you said, with that edge number, it's going to be
That's what
probably
happens.
stupendous. I would say, especially you got this offseason, there's going to be a ton of premium free agents on the market, and there's going to be a lot of guys getting paid. So,
Can I just
but
add to
yeah,
that?
yeah, go ahead.
So I feel like the biggest contributors to that is going to be this upcoming offseason and this season's draft. I feel
Yeah,
like if this team drafts pretty well this year's draft, and obviously next year they're going to have a lot more money, what they do with that is going to tell you what their plan is for the future.
yeah,
If they just go
yeah,
out and get a bunch of guys and then, I mean, go even more in, okay, then maybe that's not a top priority for them. But I could see, this offseason Shakir getting an extension or Bernard. I mean, we've seen Bernard makes that defense tick. When he's
yes,
out there, there's
yes,
just a different kind of confidence, a different kind of swagger that it just doesn't have when he's not out there.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we go see them sign a corner and draft an edge and a slot receiver in the first two picks, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, maybe two of those guys are going to leave. Maybe we only keep Bernard. So it just, I think there's a lot of things that could change between now and then. And then, we'll kind of see what they do. But I think that's a great way to look at it is we're going to see this offseason what they prioritize. Maybe we see an early extension, but very likely we get through
Yeah,
the free agency and draft before we get to what the long term plan
Mhm.
is if he shows some of
yeah,
his cards. But I think
yeah.
it's a great lens to look at.
I definitely don't think anything's going to happen in season. It would
No,
have
no.
to be in the off season. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate everybody tuning in. It was a fun episode. I appreciate you coming on, Greg. It was a lot of fun, and looking forward to what happens here in the next few hours. Obviously, trades can happen
Yeah.
at any given moment, so maybe there's already been something that's happened. I haven't even been paying
Never
attention.
know. Never
You
know.
never
I
know,
just watched
and
Patrick Mahomes get sacked again, so I'm having a great
well,
day.
that's great. I can't wait to turn on the game. What's the score right now?
Bucks are up
14-10.
14-10.
Oh,
14-10.
well,
And they
let's go
just
Bucks.
had a sack that got the ball punted back to them.
All right. Well, maybe
Love to
maybe
see
the
it.
door is
Go
not
Bucks.
entirely
Never
shut
know.
on the one
Never know.
seed.
Go
So
Bucks.
Let's get
yeah,
that
go
one seed.
Bucks. Everybody have a great night. Greg, once again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate you having me
Thank
Uh,
you.
on.
Greg, I'll just give you a second, plug all your stuff. You're the man. I mean, just let us know where we can find you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on today. This is a ton of fun. Wherever you guys are listening to this show, you can also find our stuff at Cover One. So come over and find us there. Search for us on YouTube or anywhere else you find or listen to podcasts. Or if you want to ask me any questions, you come find me most usually on Twitter at Greg Tompsett. So
Yeah.
come on over, have a good time.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on as it should be a fun next couple hours. So everybody have a good night and go Bills.